Have you ever sat down at your desk at 9 a.m., full of noble intentions, only to find that it's suddenly 1 p.m. and the only thing you've actually accomplished is color-coding your Spotify playlists and researching whether or not squirrels can be left-handed? You haven't been lazy. In fact, you feel exhausted. Your neck is stiff, your eyes are dry, and you feel like you've just run a marathon through a swamp of honey. This is the great paradox of the modern worker, especially for the introverts and the scanners among us. We aren't suffering from a lack of time, we are suffering from brain lag. In our last conversation, we talked about the scanner's dilemma, the agony of having too many interests. We talked about how to build the muscle of tenacity. But today, we need to talk about the weight of those interests. Because for many of you, the problem isn't that you aren't working hard enough. It's that your brain is carrying so much luggage that it doesn't have the horsepower left to actually move. Today, I want to introduce you to the zero-burden productivity system. But first, as your resident mind decoder, I need to clear up a massive psychological misconception. In the world of high performance, burden is not the volume of work on your desk. If you have 20 emails to write, that isn't a burden. That's just a list. The real burden is the mental friction caused by remembering those emails, organizing the order in which you'll write them, and the low-level background radiation of worry that you might forget one. To fix this, we have to look at the RAM of your brain. In the 1980s, an Australian educational psychologist named John Sweller developed something called cognitive load theory, CLT. It is, in my professional opinion, the most important piece of science you've never heard of. Sweller suggested that our working memory, the buffer where we process information, is extremely limited. Think of it like a small workbench. You can only fit a few tools on it at a time. If you try to put a chainsaw, a hammer, a drill, and a pile of timber on that tiny bench all at once, nothing gets built. The workbench just collapses. Sweller identified 3 types of load that occupy your brain's workbench, and understanding the difference is the secret to why you feel burned out before you've even started. First, there is intrinsic load. This is simply the natural difficulty of the task. If you are learning a new language or solving a complex architectural problem, that is a heavy tool. You can't make the tool lighter, but you can break it into smaller pieces. Second, there is germane load. This is the good load. This is the energy your brain uses to create schemas, mental maps that allow you to learn and solve problems faster. When you are in a flow state, your brain is almost entirely occupied by germane load. This is where peak performance lives. But then, there is the enemy, the thief of genius. Sweller calls it extrinsic load. Extrinsic load is the mental noise. It's the messy files on your desktop. It's the notification pinging on your phone. It's the nagging thought of, where did I save that password? Or what was the deadline for that report again? For the multitasker and the deep-thinking introvert, extrinsic load is a silent killer. Because we process information so deeply, we often accidentally invite more noise into the system. Every piece of unorganized information is a process running in the background of your brain, eating up your RAM. When your working memory is filled with extrinsic load, you experience brain lag. You sit at your desk, the cursor blinks, and your brain simply refuses to engage. Why? Because the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain, is already exhausted from making tiny, useless decisions. Should I check that Slack message? Where's my pen? Is it too early for a third coffee? By the time you actually try to do the real work, you've hit decision fatigue. Your CEO has checked out for the day, gone to the metaphorical pub, and left your creative brain with no leadership. The zero-burden system isn't about doing more work. It's about a radical neurological flush of the brain's cache. It's about moving from a state of managing information to a state of relaxed intensity. I want you to imagine a day where your mental burden is zero. You sit down, your mind is a blank canvas, and the only thing on your workbench is the one task that matters. When your cognitive burden is zero, your creative potential becomes infinite. So, how do we actually operate this? How do we move the noise off the workbench and into a system we can trust? It requires 3 psychological pillars that move the processing from your expensive, high-energy prefrontal cortex to the more efficient autopilot regions of your brain. The first step in flushing your brain's cache and reaching that state of zero burden is a process I call externalization, or as I like to tell my patients, stop treating your brain like a filing cabinet when it was designed to be a processor. The science here is simple but profound. Your brain is a magnificent machine for generating ideas, but it is frankly terrible machine for holding them. When you try to remember a task, let's say buy milk or email the French bureau, your brain uses a specific amount of energy to keep that thought active. This is a loop. If you have 10 of these loops running, your prefrontal cortex is effectively screaming at itself all day to not forget. By moving these tasks into a trusted external system, be it a notebook, a digital tool like Notion, or even a simple app, your brain receives a literal neurological signal. It is safe to forget this. When you write it down in a system you actually trust, your extrinsic load drops to near zero. You aren't just making a list, you are performing a biological offload. You are clearing the timber off the workbench so you can actually use the saw. This is why the most productive people you know often seem the most relaxed. They aren't carrying their work in their heads, they are carrying it in their systems. But offloading the data is only half the battle. We also need to fix how you use your energy, which brings us to the second pillar, standardization, or neural automation. Think of your prefrontal cortex as a manual gearbox in a car. It's powerful, it's precise, but it requires a lot of driver input and burns a lot of fuel. Every time you have to decide how to start a task, what software to open, or where to find your notes, you are grinding the gears of your PFC. However, your brain has another region called the basal ganglia. This is the autopilot of the mind. It's where your habits live. When you brush your teeth or drive a familiar route, your basal ganglia takes over, and your PFC, the expensive CEO, can go take a nap. The zero burden system uses standardization to move the boring parts of your work from the PFC to the basal ganglia. If you have a set routine for how you start your morning, how you file your documents, and how you end your day, those tasks become free in terms of energy. You aren't deciding anymore, you're just doing. You save that precious mental battery for the intrinsic load, the hard, creative, complex work that actually moves the needle. You want your work life to feel like an automatic car, smooth, effortless, and optimized for the long haul. Finally, we have to talk about your physical space, environmental minimalism. I know, some of you are looking at your organized chaos right now and thinking, but I know exactly where everything is in that pile of papers. The neuroscience disagrees with you. Every object in your field of vision is what psychologists call a visual stimulus. Even if you aren't consciously looking at that half-empty coffee mug or that stack of unopened mail, your brain is subconsciously processing them. It's asking, is that important? Do I need to do something with that? Why is there a dead spider on that envelope? Every one of these subconscious checks is a tiny ping on your RAM. It's extrinsic load that you didn't even ask for. Environmental minimalism isn't about being a trendy minimalist. It's about reducing the number of unplanned meetings your brain has to have with your desk. A clean environment allows your brain to enter what we call deep work. It turns your mind from a scattered light bulb into a focused laser. So, let's put this all together. The zero burden system is the art of working with less effort. It is the understanding that your brain is a finite resource. By externalizing your thoughts, standardizing your routines, and minimalizing your environment, you aren't just being productive, you're being kind to your biology. You are freeing up the buffer so that you can finally use your brain for what it was meant to do, to create, to connect, and to solve. When you remove the friction, the work doesn't just get faster, it gets better. I've created a new tool to help you implement this, something I call the cognitive load audit. It's a simple framework to help you identify where your brain lag is coming from and how to flush your specific cache. You can download it for free at the link in the description. This system isn't about doing more work. It's about reaching a state where the work no longer carries a weight. Because when your cognitive burden is zero, your creative potential becomes truly infinite. Stop carrying the weight. Start using the system. I'm the Mind Decoder, and I'll see you in the next one.